Syracuse is one of the toughest teams to project in 2025.
You are Locked On ACC, your daily podcast on the Atlantic Coast Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into Locked On ACC. I'm Jackson Holzer, filling in for Alex Dono. I am the host of Locked On Syracuse here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Of course, we are always joined by Kenton Gibbs, former NC State defensive tackle and current co-host of the Locked On NC State Wolfpack podcast. And on today's show, similar to what we did the other day with Clemson, it's preview season for the 2025 college football season. We're going to go the season prediction for Syracuse football, talking about their defense, and we're going to start the podcast talking about their offense. Now, before we get to everything, this episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. So normally for these season previews, we have on the host of the team in the ACC to provide context as to, tell us about your team, right? Tell us about your offense, your defense, and your expectations for the season. Well, I'm the Syracuse host. So, Kenton, the floor is yours. What do you want to know about Syracuse football in 2025?
First of all, will Fran Brown start washing if he loses this season? Let's start there before we go to anywhere. No, but in all seriousness, this is a team last year was a definite riser, definitely seen as a team with one of the rising young stars in the coaching ranks in Fran Brown. Did a lot of great things last year. I believe the finishing record was 9-4?
9-3 in the regular season, 10-3 with the bowl win.
Okay, 10-win season. 10-win season. That's big time anywhere, but almost anywhere in the nation, but especially at Syracuse. 10 wins, first season, hell of a season, hell of a job. Do you think it's possible to come anywhere near that success this year?
I do think it's possible. When you talk about Syracuse's ceiling, they still have the big three coaches there. And the big three coaches are your head coach is Fran Brown, your offensive coordinator is Jeff Nixon, and your defensive coordinator is Elijah Robinson. I'm not going to lie to you. They lost most, if not all, of their key talent from a year ago. It's basically all gone. I mean, shout out a name. I can almost guarantee you that player is gone. Right? Like Aronde Gadsden, where's he? NFL. Where's Justin Barron? NFL. Kyle McCord, is he back? NFL. All their guys are basically gone. So the key of this offseason was, okay, can you find other players in the transfer portal or currently on your roster that fit your schemes? Because if they fit your schemes and there's some talent there, you might have a chance to be able to replicate this season. But I do think it's going to be tougher than it was a year ago.
Okay, and one of the things that, let's talk about specifically, you talk about the offense, defensive coordinator, both coming back. Let's talk about the offense. One of the most high-powered in the nation, behind Kyle McCord. For the most part, when he was good, he was damn good. He had one or two games where you're like, there's the Kyle we know. But for the most part, he was spectacular all last year. How do you go about replacing that quarterback? Do you think it'll be Rickie Collins? Do you think it'll be Steve Angeli? Who do you think is QB1 for the season opener for Syracuse?
Well, it was really interesting what happened this offseason with Syracuse football. At first, it seemed like they were going to try to get Kyle McCord his fifth year of eligibility by going through this whole waiver process. Turns out that Kyle McCord at the end of the day was like, you know what? I'm not going to go through this process. I'm going to go enter the NFL draft. More power to him. He ends up getting drafted. I hope it works out for him. So then Syracuse obviously has to replace him. I didn't think they felt that anyone on the roster was ready to actually do so for 2025. So they go in the portal and they get Rickie Collins from LSU, who just did not see the field a whole lot. I mean, it's LSU, so you can't really blame him a whole lot. We've seen quarterbacks around the country not get playing time at a certain school, but it doesn't mean that they are bad. It's simply because you only got one quarterback on the field, right? Yeah. He's behind Jaden Daniels. He's behind Garrett Nussmeier. Garrett Nussmeier decides to return to LSU. There's no shot that Rickie Collins is going to beat out Garrett Nussmeier for this upcoming season. So he transfers to Syracuse, and he ends up winning the job. As we kind of predicted, he wins the job. He was anointed the starter in the spring, I should say, by Fran Brown publicly, I might add. And then all of a sudden it comes out who the loser is of the Notre Dame quarterback battle. And it just so happens to be Steve Angeli. And there's a direct connection with Steve Angeli in Syracuse football. A, he was offered by Syracuse in high school. And B, his high school coach is the brother of the Syracuse quarterback coach, Nunzio Campanelli. So you start hearing rumblings that Syracuse might be going after this guy, Angeli. And lo and behold, they get him. Mm-hmm. So now they have a quarterback competition, and it's fascinating because neither quarterback is coming to Syracuse to ride the bench, right? Like they could have done it at their other schools. Steve Angeli could have stayed at Notre Dame and just been the backup there again, or Rickie Collins could have been the backup again at LSU, but they both decided to enter the portal, and they both decided to go to Syracuse under the impression that they would have the opportunity to start. My guess is that Steve Angeli will win the job. But I got to be honest with you, I don't think we'll know until about a week maybe before the first game, which is against Tennessee.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the most concerning part of that, as looking from the outside in, we all know the old adage, if you have two quarterbacks, you have none. And so you're kind of left here with the who wins the starting battle, and do you believe that this team believed in Rickie Collins? Because if so, why would you go into the portal and potentially go get another quarterback? You know, you're kind of going through a lot of the paces there. But staying on the offensive side of the ball here, it's not just about the quarterback position, because you talk about the quarterback and you talk about how, you know, he's gone, talk about all the skill position guys gone, all that good stuff. What is the silver lining for this offense coming out of the offseason? What is the thing that you say Syracuse will be able to hang their hat on this, despite X amount of departing talent from last year's 10-win squad?
I know it's hard to sometimes think long-term in this day and age because of the transfer portal and the fact that, hey, you might have someone who you think is going to be there long-term, and then lo and behold, they enter the transfer portal at the end of the season. That guy that you invested all that time in recruiting, too bad. He's gone after a year because he just had a good year. He gets paid more money, etc. Whatever the case may be. Maybe he's got another relationship. You get the idea. Having said that, we're going to find out. That's the silver lining. A lot of their guys have multiple years of eligibility. See, last season was mostly built with the impression that a lot of the guys would not be back. And even the guys that had eligibility, like a LaQuinn Allen and a Rondé Gadsden, we kind of felt that if they have really good years, they're probably going to go to the NFL. Well, this year, I guess it's a good problem to have if a lot of their guys have a good year and go to the NFL. But the silver lining is a lot of their guys are young. A lot of their guys are going to get their first chance at a new role, whether it's a guy like Darryl Gill, who really thrived last season at wide receiver, but he was the 5th option on the offense. Now he's the number 1 option on the offense. A guy like Jonte Cook has a chance to reboot his career as a former 5-star in 2023. Who's going to break out at tight end now that Rondé Gadsden is not there? Is a guy like Yassine Willis in the backfield going to be able to take over for a guy like LaQuinn Allen? Their offensive line is completely replaced. We're going to find out who are the players that should stick around in 2026 as key contributors. And we're also going to find out who simply does not have it. We're also going to find out about quarterback because both Angeli and Rickie Collins have multiple years of eligibility. That's the silver lining for Syracuse's offense.
All right. And then the last thing here, what concerns you most? What position group are you most like? This group having a good year would be a surprise, to say the least. I'd walk away saying, boy, that group, they sure fooled all of us in the preseason.
It's funny because you can honestly make the case for any position group in Syracuse because I don't think they're that experienced, quite frankly. Right. The one that I'm most confident in is the wide receivers. I like Darryl Gill. I like Jonte Cook and what they have behind them as well. Tight end, I'm still kind of iffy on, but I'm never really going to be too concerned about the tight end position because, quite frankly, it's not as important as a unit like the offensive line or the quarterback room, even the running back room to a certain extent. It's kind of a toss-up between the offensive line and quarterback. Because at least I'll go offensive line. At least with quarterback, with a guy like Steve Angeli, he's that 80 career passing attempts. I can kind of look at that and say, maybe there's something there because he's done pretty well in those 80 passing attempts. But the offensive line, they're replacing, I believe, 4 of their 5 starters from a year ago. A lot of the guys that they got in the transfer portal, whether it's a guy like TJ Ferguson or a Cam Pringle or an Austin Collins. Austin Collins does have a lot of starting experience. Same with TJ Ferguson, but how great of starting experience do they truly have? Cam Pringle's a former 4-star guy. Great. Is he ready for 2025 to be a full-time starter? Just a lot of question marks along the offensive line and also at quarterback.
All right, fair enough. Well, I think that we've gotten into Syracuse's offense as in-depth as we can in this time here. But stick with us, folks. We'll be right back talking some Syracuse defense, which is where Fran Brown made his hay. So we're going to get into Syracuse's defense and offseason predictions right after this.
Guys, you've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiet Ready. Rugiet Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rugiet's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue and kicks in fast on average in 15 minutes. Effects can last up to 36 hours, so you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right. If traditional options haven't worked, Rugiet might be the answer. Over 150,000 men have already made the switch. Head to Rugiet.com/LockedOnCollege and use code LockedOnCollege to get 15% off today. That's RUGIET.com/LockedOnCollege and use promo code LockedOnCollege for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit the Rugiet website for full safety information. This is Locked On ACC. I'm Jackson Holzer, the host of Locked On Syracuse. Of course, we're always joined by Kenton Gibbs, former NC State defensive tackle and a co-host for the Locked On Wolfpack podcast. We talked about Syracuse's offense in the last segment, but Kenton, I'll throw it to you again. Let's talk about Syracuse's defense.
All righty. We're talking about the mob here, ladies and gentlemen, the Syracuse defense, which Fran Brown, defensive back coach at Georgia before he took over here as the head coach at Syracuse. So let me ask you this. Same thing as with the offense. Give me the outlook overall. What do you see from this defense overall that you say they have the ability to improve from last year, or they'll be, just as bad as last year? Because there were some struggles there. Let's just be honest. Despite winning 10 games, there were some struggles there, but they were opportunistic. Got turnovers in the right moments, came up with big stops when they needed to. Do you think that this team improves and becomes a more consistent unit, or is it still like last year where you're like, hey, just give me a couple turnovers again. Just give me a couple big moments and we'll be all right?
I think the issue with the defense is that last year the offense masked a lot of their flaws because the offense could simply outscore any of the problems that the team actually had. Defense last year, I'm looking at the stats right now, they were 14th in the ACC. So that's bottom 5 in points per game. Not particularly good. I am hoping that Syracuse can improve upon that, but it's very similar to the offense where you're asking a lot of players to be full-time starters or in their particular job for the very first time. They got a couple of experienced guys, particularly in the secondary at the safety position. Duce, Chestnut, and Devin are both back for Syracuse. I think they're both candidates to make all ACC. But when I look at this defense, it's very similar to the offense where I'm saying, this group is very young. They got some talent, but they're very young. So we're going to find out exactly what's going to happen here. And again, it's more like a long-term thinking. We figure out who maybe the pillars are for 2025 on defense, and we try to hold on to them for the 2026 season.
They say that you like for a defense to be built a lot like a baseball team. You need to be strong up the middle. You talk about having 2 good safeties, but obviously you've got to replace a guy like Marlowe Wax. You've got to replace some defensive tackles as well, who, some folks say we're tampered with, some folks do not. But what do you kind of look at in terms of that front 7 and saying, hey, these are going to be guys that could potentially be key difference makers? Or is there nobody right now? And it's a lot like you were talking about the offensive line and quarterback where you're just like, hey, anybody who shows, they show, and we're all going to be a little surprised.
I am worried a little bit about the linebacker position. I think they did okay with the front. They got a guy like David Reese off the edge. I don't think he's Fidel Diggs, but he's got 11 sacks over the past 2 seasons in a power conference. So kind of confident that he can be a facsimile a little bit of a guy like Fidel Diggs. And then they got a guy like Chris Thomas, a run stuffer from Marshall. I like that pickup as well. They got George Rooks, a starter from Boston College. He wasn't the greatest, but at the same time, you get a starter for another ACC team. Maybe he can be better for Syracuse. I think they did okay, despite losing Murad Watson on the defensive line. But linebacker, I think it was one of the bigger needs of the offseason, and I don't think they did enough, quite frankly. I'm looking at a guy like Anwar Sparrow, who, are you sure he's ready to be a full-time starter? Are you sure? It's never really been that at Syracuse. Derek McDonald, at times he struggled last season. He does have a lot of starting experience. You're also looking at a guy like a true freshman, Antoine Delorier, true freshman linebacker. He's jacked, I'll give him that, but is he ready to play right away as a true freshman? And let me just say this also about Fran Brown. He ain't afraid to play true freshman. We had on Morgan Thomas for yesterday's season preview for Clemson, right? And he talked about how Dabo Swinney, unless you're like Sammy Watkins, does not like to play true freshman. He didn't even start Trevor Lawrence as a true freshman right away. That's how it is sometimes, right? Fran Brown's almost the opposite. He's going to play the guy who he believes gives him the best chance to win, and he does not care what your year is. Are you a senior or are you a freshman? I don't care. Whoever's better is going to play. That's what I bring up with a guy like Antoine Delorier. Is he ready to play if he's called upon as a true freshman? So when I look at the defense, I think my biggest concern overall is probably that linebacker room.
Okay, so you talked about the secondary being the spot where you're like, hey, especially at safety, we're good there, all set, all that type of stuff. If you are expecting a group to lead this team, I'm guessing you would say the secondary is going to have to step up and be the leaders overall for this team and kind of set the tone of, hey, if y'all don't know which way to go, we'll make it easy. Follow us and we'll take you to the promised land.
That's essentially what I'm saying, yes, because you have 2 experienced starters that are back there. Both have all conference on their resume. Duce Chestnut was all ACC in 2021 and 2022. Devin Grant, while he's not an all ACC guy, he has been all conference in the MAC conference, which I know it's the MAC conference. It's not. But the point is, he was also a full-time starter last year, and Miami fans might know him pretty well because he had that great play against Xavier Restrepo that gave Syracuse the lead in the third quarter of that upset win. And then on top of those guys, they're very young, but at corner, they got one of the top recruits in Syracuse in the past 2 decades, and a guy like Demetrius Samuel Jr., a consensus 4-star recruit, a borderline top 200 player overall in the country out of high school. Again, he's a true freshman, but he's getting a lot of raves with Syracuse, a lot of positive reviews with him. They think he's going to be really good right away as a true freshman. So I'm excited to see him play. And then behind him, you got a guy like Davian Kerr, who he didn't really see the field a whole lot last year. He was a true freshman. And then all of a sudden, he was called upon to start the Cal game because a couple of guys had disciplinary issues on the team. And he started every game from there on. And so he has that built-in kind of runway of, okay, he's played in college football. We're not asking Davian Kerr to do something he's never done before, which is be a starting corner, because he's already been a starting corner for 4 games. He can maybe do it as a full-time role this upcoming season. Now, Tennessee is going to be a different animal in week 1 than maybe he's ever seen before. But the point being is that you got an exciting true freshman at your one corner. Your other corner is likely Davian Kerr, who started games. And then behind him, Syracuse, I think, made an under-the-radar pickup in the portal, getting a guy like Chris Peel from Georgia, who was a 4-star recruit for them a couple of years ago. He didn't see the field a whole lot at Georgia. A lot of players don't see the field at Georgia. But I've talked about this with the portal, and a lot of people don't like it. A lot of people don't like the portal, quite frankly. And I understand some of the reasons why. But one of the positives of it is you can no longer hoard talent. You can't just hoard them. If you don't play them, they're going to leave because they all kind of have aspirations of being a professional, whether it's the NFL or the CFL, whatever it is, they all want to eventually be pros. Chris Peel, maybe he's one of those guys where he's good. He just couldn't see the field at Georgia because they're loaded. he can come to Syracuse and be perhaps a starting corner on the team. So I think the secondary is probably the strength of Syracuse's defense.
I think one of the more interesting parts about Peel as well is he was there at the same time as Fran Brown. So Fran Brown knows this kid. It's not like that's a young man where it's like there's no familiarity. There's just like, hey, I hope he works hard. I hope he's a good guy. I hope he does the right things. No, you know him as being a guy who formerly coached him.
Yes, and what I wanted to build on that, I believe Fran Brown was his primary recruiter in high school. So the relationship was already there. He doesn't see the field at Georgia. Jackson Meeks didn't see the field a whole lot at Georgia. And Jackson Meeks was not a 4-star recruit, by the way. He wasn't. He was a 3-star at Georgia. He spent a lot of time there. He developed there, but he didn't really get a lot of playing time. He comes to Syracuse, and he wasn't even a starting wide receiver right away for the team. That's how funny it is. He was not a starting wide receiver at the start of the year, but he gets his opportunity around week 3, week 4, and thrives. Maybe it's something similar with a guy like Chris Peel, where he might not start the year. Like he'll be active. I'm not saying he's like hurt or anything. He'll be active, but he might not be one of their top.
He might not be the starter. Gotcha.
He might not be the starter. He might not even be the 3rd guy. Maybe he's the 4th or 5th guy. And then all of a sudden, injuries happen, unfortunately. It's just how the sport works. Guys are going to get hurt. It happens. He's called upon, which I'm sure he will be, and maybe he plays pretty well, and he's the next Jackson Meeks, but on the defensive side of the ball.
Absolutely. So before we get out of here in terms of the defensive questions, I will be proud, or Jackson Holzer believes this defense did a good job in 2025, 2026 if they allow X amount of points. What's that amount?
Last year, they gave up 29.2 a game.
Mm-hmm.
I think if Syracuse finishes around middle of the pack in defense, with this schedule that they got, it's tougher than last year, and the youth on the team, if they give up 25 points per game, I think I'll sign for that. Because I think that would finish. If you got up 25 points a game last year, you were right there with Miami, Georgia Tech, and Duke was at 24.5 between 7 and 9 in the ACC. So you're right there in the middle of the pack. I think if Syracuse gives up only about 25 points a game, we're in pretty good shape because I think the offense will still be pretty good. It's not going to be like last year, but it should still be pretty good.
All righty. You heard it here first, folks. 25 points per game is Jackson Holzer saying, hey, this is a great season for you all. Let's see if they can get it. We're going to get into.
I don't know if it's a great season. I'll just sign for it.
I'll
sign for 25. I'll sign for 20. Great season.
And Jackson and I thought we were going to agree about everything today. And here we go with this. 25 would be a great season for a defense that allowed 29 and lost a ton of key pieces. Like, that's a damn good season.
It's a great improvement, but great season, I would probably say like 22 to 23 a game. But I think that's being too greedy. But you're talking about great? I think that would be great. I'll sign for 25.
With a front seven where you have pretty much unproven commodities all over the place, and somebody says, hey, you'll only give up 25, and you're like, yeah, I'll sign for it. I'm not sure if I love it, but I'd sign for it. The beauty that is Jackson Holzer, ladies and gentlemen. I'll
sign for it.
In a nutshell. He'll sign for the package. He's just not going to be excited about it. This deliveries for me, I guess. He just ain't going to be excited about it.
Have you ever gotten a Christmas present where you're like, I like this gift, but it's not, my favorite. It wasn't at the top of my list.
Of course, we all have.
Okay, so it's kind of like that with Syracuse's defense. If Syracuse's defense next year, if we're talking in December, January, and we're like, hey, they gave up 25 points a game this year, I'll sit there and say, yeah, that's pretty good. Jackson, I'm not going to sit here and say it's great.
Jackson, with half of last year's playoff on your schedule, if you give up 25 with more unproven commodities than last year, with more unknown factors and variables than last year, I don't know what you're talking about. Stocks as a kid, not a great gift. Socks as an adult, Hell yeah, I love that. I need that. This is that. This is Sox as an adult. 25 points per game out of this defense with this schedule. But see, this is Jackson like to get my blood pressure up. I got to go work out after this because he's stressing me out. He's stressing me out. But we'll be right back to talk ceiling, floor, and what Jackson actually thinks will happen with the Syracuse Orange.
Ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. So you got an investment account, a Roth IRA, maybe your savings, your checking, and you can just combine them all together into Monarch Money. And you can take control of your finances with Monarch Money today. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. It's time for predictions for Syracuse football in 2025. I'm Jackson Holzer, the host of Locked On Syracuse. Of course, we're always joined by Kenton Gibbs, co-host of Locked On Wolfpack and former NC State defensive tackle. We've talked about Syracuse's offense. We've talked about Syracuse's defense for 2025. Kenton, I'll throw it to you now. What do you think is going to happen with Syracuse as far as season prediction?
I mean, listen, if you're asking for my season prediction for Syracuse, I just think that there is too high of a mountain to climb and too many unknowns for me to predict this team to win anything beyond 6 games. Like we've talked about ad nauseum, half of last year's playoff is on your schedule. That's just a fact. That's just a fact. And you know, you look at this and you say, well, even if everything breaks right for this team, I see maybe 7, maybe 8 to me feels like, because if you do the math on who they beat to get to 8 wins, that means that you're imagining every one of those games where you're not playing a playoff team, you win, or you upset one of those teams, which, I mean, you know, you talk about the teams that are on the schedule. Clemson looks like an absolute unit. Notre Dame, I think that they have a lot of big questions, but I think that the positions they have answered are so much better than what Syracuse may be prepared for. I think that's a tough ask. SMU, that's one. That's one where I say, yeah, that's possible. Tennessee is another one. Just, again, they have big questions, but the units that are answered, boy, signed, sealed, delivered. That answers yours. So I think, you know, maybe you upset SMU, but then you lose to one of the other teams that weren't a playoff team last year. I think floor, you're looking at 4 to 5 wins. Ceiling, I think you're looking at 7 tops. I think 7 is about the ceiling there. But I'm not the Syracuse guy. I'm not the guy that the people are here to see talk about Syracuse. So I'm going to ask you, give me your floor and your ceiling, and then what you think will actually shake out with this team.
We definitely agree on the floor. I actually did this podcast on Tuesday for Locked On Syracuse, and I said, as equally optimistic or as optimistic as I can be about Syracuse football, I am equally pessimistic about Syracuse football. And that's why I ultimately led this podcast with, I think they're one of the most unpredictable teams in the ACC, if not the country, because you look at Syracuse and you say, oh, they won 10 games last year. Shouldn't they be pretty good this year? Shouldn't they be formidable? They still got Fran Brown. They still got their their offensive coordinator and the defensive coordinator still there. Like the coaching staff for the most part is the same, except their players are so much different. And the schedule looks a lot harder, at least on paper. We'll see how that actually plays out. But it does look a lot harder on paper than it did a year ago when we were talking around this time, right? I think we can all agree on that. So when I look at the floor for Syracuse, I see like 4 wins. There's definitely a world where Syracuse has a disappointing second season under Fran Brown because the schedule was really difficult. They do not have a proven quarterback like they did with Kyle McCord last year. And so they end up going out and they only win 4 games. But where I disagree with you is the ceiling for Syracuse football. I think because of last year and the fact that they retained their top 3 coaches on the team, right? Nobody left or anything like that. So you're not changing schemes or anything. You know what works and you know what doesn't work. I do still think there is a way where if everything breaks right, their ceiling could be 9 wins, which would give them maybe an outside chance at the college football playoff. Like, it would be tough for them to get in at 9-3, but with their schedule, it would be more likely than last year where they were 9-3 and they had no chance at getting in the playoff because, quite frankly, nobody really respected Syracuse's schedule. And that's why Selection Sunday came. Nobody gave them a thought. Whereas with Alabama, where they were 9-3, a lot of people gave them consideration. In fact, they would have gotten in if not for Clemson stealing a bid, or Miami going 10-2 also got consideration. But when I look at Syracuse's ceiling, I say you can go 9-3 and still lose to Clemson, Notre Dame, and Tennessee. So that's where I'm at with the absolute best case scenario and the worst case scenario we agree on as well at about 4 wins.
So what do you think will actually happen? What is the world that you see as most likely for the Syracuse Orange next year?
So rarely does everything break right and everything break wrong for a team in a season. That's just how it is. So that's why I love doing a floor ceiling combination, because you can just average them out and meet in the middle. So 9 wins is a ceiling, 4 wins is a floor. That adds up to 13. You divide by 2, you get 6.5. So I would say that I think they're going to be a bowl team, but they're going to be a lower bowl team than they were last year. They're not going to be playing in the Holiday Bowl this season. They're going to get a lesser bowl, maybe win 6 to 7 games.
Well, you heard it here first, folks. Syracuse Orange are getting a home game for the bowl game. They'll be in Yankee Stadium for their bowl game. I'm just messing with you. But in all seriousness, thank you so very much, as always, for showing up, Jackson. I agree with you on the most likely situation and on the floor. That ceiling feels a bit high, feels a bit aggressive. But you know what?
Steve Angeli has a big year.
If you would have told me Syracuse wins 10 last year, I would have said that feels aggressive. No way. So maybe I've got a bias against Syracuse football that I need to get out my heart. If they win 9 this year, I may need to get it out my heart, and y'all coach may need to get out of Syracuse. But that's neither here nor there. Thank you so very much, Jackson.
Thank you. And for what it's worth, last year, my ceiling for them was 10 regular season wins. That was what it was last year. And my floor was 6. And so I met in the middle and I said 8-4. They end up going slightly better. They go 9-3, which is kind of where they should have been, because you look at Syracuse last year and you say, they could have been Indiana. And then you also look at Syracuse to say, what happened against UNLV? How about a 21-point comeback against Miami? How about a big comeback against Virginia Tech? So it all kind of worked out. They finished exactly where they were supposed to be a year ago. And I'm hoping that they're at least a bowl team for this upcoming season. In fact, I'll sign for it. Just get a bowl. Just get a bowl for 2025. It's a tough schedule. Just get a bowl, and I will be happy as of right now on June 25th. All right, but anyways, this has been another episode of Locked On ACC. I'm Jackson Holzer, the host of Locked On Syracuse. That's Kenton Gibbs, the host of Locked On Wolfpack. Thank you all so much for watching. Thank you all so much for listening. If you like this podcast, be sure to hit that like button. And if you really enjoy Locked On ACC, if you can just do us all a favor, hit that subscribe button. Helps the channel grow to reach all ACC fans. And we'll be back soon with another season preview for the upcoming 2025 college football season.